Wolf Pack. I realize I'm actually probably talking to two Wolf Packs now, both full of alphas. That's because my man Mike Liu is joining the Fantasy Fullback Dad for the first time in history. I'm so pumped to have him on as I get ready to traverse the old Dynasty waters here. There's not a mind I could not be more thrilled to pick here than Mike. Every time we interact on Twitter, I always feel significantly smarter. He's written for some big Dynasty sites like dynastynerds.com, dynastyleaguefootball.com, and he's currently crushing content over for the surging Big Dog Gotta Eat fantasy brand, where he's one half of the great YouTube show Bunk Bed Breakdowns. Mike, thanks so much for joining me, man. How's it going tonight?
It's going good, yo. Thanks for having me on. It's good to chop it up with you. I mean, we've had very good interactions. I think I first learned about you when Scott Barrett, I think, tweeted about you, and I started looking at some of your stuff. Like, yeah, this guy, kind of knows what he's doing. It seems like we think about players very similarly, so it's always good to kind of chop it up with other, more analytically framed minds.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, that was a big moment. A lot of people ended up finding me that one. So cheers to Scott. But yeah, it's gotten me opened up to a lot of, that's how I got interacting with you. And we've just had some great back and forth. So I'm just thrilled to be able to chat kind of in person, over the air at least. So we're going back and forth here. So I'm thrilled for it, man. But as I was kind of previewing with you in the DMs and everything, I'm brand new to Dynasty. I don't even know if my followers really know that. So it's kind of a confession off my chest here. I've never really played it, but we're getting the first RSJ Dynasty Startup League going. And I cannot wait to get going. And ever since I found you, especially, your rankings over on Patreon, you can find those over at patreon.com/rpack. I've just found you to be one of the more enlightening yet still accessible guys. You're chatting with your Discord all day. Like you crush it, man. You crush it for your people, and your content's just so clean and clear to follow. So I'm excited just to selfishly pick your brain here and dig in. You ready to go?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Let's get it.
Absolutely, man. And I just want to start, like, as I was saying, again, I'm new, but I feel like once I start Dynasty, it's going to be one of those kind of like, why haven't I been doing this my whole entire life? Like, this is the way to do fantasy football. Is that kind of how you feel about Dynasty compared to Redraft? What do you think is like the big advantages to it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think about it this way. Like Redraft, you make a mistake, right? It hurts you for one season. Dynasty, you make a mistake, it kind of like hurts you forever, right? You got to like try and come back from that. So, it's really tough to like, if you make compounded mistakes, especially if you're just new to Dynasty. Like I just started playing 3 years ago, and some of my first leagues, like I realized what the mistakes I made back then. It takes you like a couple of years to really climb back out. But if you're that type of person that really appreciates a challenge, it's really good. But also, if you know what you're doing, like the mistakes compound, but so do the benefits. Yeah. So if you're crushing a league, like, people post a lot of leagues on Twitter, and you get a lot of the trolls that go in, what is that, like a 5-man league? What is that, a 10-man league? And it's like, no, they just can't comprehend you getting that many good players. But, it's built over time, over 2 to 3 years, and just getting in and out the right time. So I think for someone like you that kind of treats fantasy kind of like a financial market, like I do, that it's a really beneficial for players like us, because we understand how to get the compounding effects. And, that's really how you build like monsters. Like I can show you some of my teams, and when you look at them, it's like, how the fuck did he build that? And it's just like, it's over 2 to 3 years of just nonstop trading and drafting well and stuff like that. So, it's really, really rewarding when you build teams in Dynasty. And I've not gone back to redraft. Like the only redraft I play is with my home league, and that's it.
Yeah. I love it, man. And as you said that, like, I remember I was watching a video, I think you just posted a couple days ago on the bunk bed breakdowns of one of those teams, just like, how the fuck did this happen? I mean, it was Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson in a super flex with AJ Brown, DJ Moore, Stefon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, like Michael Thomas. I mean, like literally 5 of the top like 8 receivers probably in Dynasty. And let's mix in Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley. It's one of those things, just like, and I even messaged you. I was like, is this 10 team? You're like, no, man, I only do 12 and 14. Like this is it. So that's what got me excited. Like I can build something like this. You can't really do that in a redraft league. But if you get ahead of the curve, like that team's going to dominate for years. Like it just seems like that team will never, your league mates must hate you. Like, how am I ever going to beat something like that? Oh man, I can't wait. I'm just so excited to dig in. And Wolfpack, if you don't mind giving this, whether you're catching the restream or you're live here with us, the thumbs up helps us get out to more people. And of course, subscriptions always help us continue to grow the pack. And we greatly, greatly appreciate that. So that explains really clearly, why Dynasty makes sense. the question now becomes, what is the big mindset shifts? Like, obviously, of course, it's longer term versus shorter term. Like, you got to think bigger picture. But what does that actually look like in action? What are some strategies you think our newcomers or even just veterans of Dynasty need to make sure they're embracing here?
Yeah, I think, most people that come to Dynasty, they kind of play it like redraft, right? They're like, hey, I'll draft this like team and I'll win right now. And I'm pretty much the exact opposite of that. People talk about delayed gratification. I think there's no greater benefit than in the Dynasty space, where I do a lot of teams where I have a productive struggle. And what that means is I don't really intend to win year one. I'll come out of the startup knowing that I'm going to lose. In fact, I'm targeting losing that year so that I can get a better pick next year. That's a beautiful thing about Dynasty, right? It's like, even when you're losing, you're winning because you're getting a higher rookie pick and you're getting first earlier pick of the next fresh crop. And the only way to improve your team is through rookie picks. So I think undervaluing rookie picks is what new Dynasty gamers always do, and it's like that's the easiest money for me. I just sit back and I'm like, oh, you don't value rookie picks? Here, I'll trade you. Trade up. Take that stud in the first round. Take that stud in the second round, and you'll only realize your mistake. But by the time you realize your mistake, it'll be too late because I'll have 3 or 4 rookie picks, and when you try and get it back from me, you're gonna have to pay like half. You're gonna have to pay like 3x what I paid to get that pick back. So delayed gratification is a really practical mindset that is very hard for people to overcome. And I know because I've been there in the year one. I'm like, I'm going to build this dominant team. I'm going to win, and I'm going to win multiple times. But really, the most successful teams I've had is ones where I've said, okay, I'm going to let other people fight for year one, but I'm going to be by myself fighting for year 2, 3, 4. So that's the biggest shift in mindset that I've had.
Love it. Yeah, delayed gratification, that keyword, and something I am not good at in general in life. So I'm going to really need to keep embracing that one as I start getting into this Dynasty. I'm totally the owner that would go right in and be like, all right, let me make this juggernaut year one. But the way I've seen some of your teams, I'm so thankful I found you. Because again, that team I just spouted off, that doesn't happen unless you embrace that type of productive struggle, that type of rebuild. And that's fantastic. So that's great to know one type of mindset to shift. What about in terms of Dynasty versus redraft, like the way you evaluate talent and ranking? How does that shift, if at all, for you?
Yeah, so this is where it's super interesting, right? In redraft, you only care about one thing: how much that player scores that year, right? That's the only factor you care about. So you can draft old guys, you can draft, the Julio Jones early and stuff like that. But in Dynasty, there's multiple factors that come into play. And I think, production is one piece of it, but arguably not even the biggest, right? There's age that comes into it. There's just general market perception, like the hype that builds. Once you get into like a Twitter hive mind and everyone starts tweeting the same shit, like you can see that player rise in ranks like 1, 2, 3 rounds over the course of 2 months. And it's crazy. And it has nothing to do with production. It has nothing to do with anything. So understanding those multiple factors, like when I build my ranks, it's not just about what I project a player can do. First of all, I don't do projections, but it's also about where I'm trying to project where that player's value is going to be. So in my rankings, I'm trying to project value. So I want to be ahead of the curve on value. That's why you'll see me rank, rookie running backs a lot earlier than other people. You'll see me rank first year productive wide receivers a lot higher than other people, because I'm trying to stay a little bit ahead of the curve, because that's how I make trades. And when I make those trades in the moment, it seems like, it's a fair trade, or even I might be losing that trade in the moment. But then you look back like a year down the line, you're like, holy shit, how the hell did Mike get that trade? And it's because you played the timing the right way. So it's not just about forecasting, talent evaluation. I think talent evaluation is this might sound stupid and counterintuitive to people, but it's a very small portion of Dynasty. And I think most people overspend their time focus on talent evaluation, when realistically, you got draft capital that's basically the NFL telling you what the talent evaluation is. You got, other film guys, you got analytics and numbers that really help you dive into talent when paired with draft capital. So there's a lot of factors you can use there. And I personally don't even spend that much time on talent evaluation, if I'm being real. What I spend the most time on is I try to understand, one, what the macroeconomic economy is like. What are the trends? What are the players that are hot? What are the players I think will be hot 1 or 2, a couple months from now? I try and get in on those players early, right? So I'm trying to study the microeconomics of my own leagues. I'm trying to understand, what my league mates do. Do they use Fantasy Pros? Do they use DLF? Do they use, do they use trade calculators? Do they use, and I take notes on all my teammates and league mates, especially ones that I play with multiple times. I have a notebook and I'll just jot it down. Like, hey, this guy uses trade calculators. This guy overvalues quarterbacks. This guy overvalues wide receivers. And I'll draw back on that pool of knowledge, and I'll go back. And when I'm making trades, I'll be like, hey, this guy uses DTC. Let me try and construct a trade in DTC that's favorable to him that I like for myself and see if that flies. So, it's a lot of game theory. I think game theory is the key to dynasty success. Everyone focusing on rookie evaluation, like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day, because if you focus on the game theory aspect and just take in the inputs for the evaluation side, I think you'll be a much more successful player. I think people spend probably 80-20 eval to game theory, probably even less, probably like 90-10. If I'm being real, some people spend 0 time. So, but it should be flipped the other way around. I spend like 80% of my time on game theory and just like draft strategy and all that stuff. And then I probably spend like 20% of my time actually evaluating players.
That's incredible. I mean, that's why we're starting this interview with more so the theories, the mindsets, the strategy. Instead of evaluating talent, you got to evaluate your league mates, the sites they might use. Like that's just like the in-depth moves that you're saying, that most people are focused solely on these players. And we'll dive into them. I know people watching here are like, yeah, we want to know who Mike loves in Dynasty. Of course, we're going to get into those guys. But still, it's that much more important to be thinking about these mindsets and what your league is doing and how you can get ahead of that curve so that you're creating these juggernauts. So it's almost like the talent will fall into your lap. There's so many other talented people better than me, better than, like as you're saying, probably better than you, that just see the game, see the players better. Let me read their reports and let me spend that extra time studying my league, seeing what they're going to do, and getting ahead of them before they even know that I'm doing that. I love it. That's fantastic. The more and more we're just talking already, I'm just like, Dynasty is going to be the best.
Yeah, you're gonna love it. You're never gonna go back. You're never gonna go back.
I don't even do redraft anymore. And like to me, I'm just like, that's my life. Like, I love fantasy football. Like, that's all I eat and breathe. And that I just know, like, by the end of this, I'm gonna be like, all right, never going back to redraft. Like, this is awesome. Fantastic, man. Well, the last two like overarching, just general Dynasty questions I have for you are: what are some crucial Dynasty pitfalls? You've already hinted at a few of them, but whether you want to reiterate those or you have some other ones to look out for, what are some Dynasty pitfalls you see owners falling into?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple, and this is not just for managers, but just finding the right league is so key, right? Because, you hear it all the time, like Dynasty Leagues don't last forever. Like the average lifespan of a Dynasty League is like 1.5 years, something like that, before it folds. And the reason why is because like everyone's doing these startups and they realize their team sucks and they bail, right? So the key is you gotta try and do your research and hopefully join a league with a good commissioner. I think what I found over time is a bad commissioner kills a league. Nothing kills a league faster than a bad commissioner. So, try and find a good commissioner, and you can use resources like, the Footballers Forum. That's where I started, because if you get a bad rep, like people aren't going to let you join the leagues anymore. And then, join Twitter communities. You can join the Big Dogs Patreon. We start leagues. Same with my Wolfpack Patreon. We have people starting up leagues there. And, the key is like try and join a league from a community versus just like hopping in a random shitty league, because you're going to get like orphans all over the place. And that's the worst feeling. But in terms of actually playing the game, like I said, do not undervalue rookie picks, because I think most people come into Dynasty and startups and they see a CMC on the board. They see a Jonathan Taylor on the board, and they're like, yeah, I'll give up a future rookie pick. I don't even know that rookie's name. And I'll give that up to move up, 5 spots to draft my guy. And that is the most common mistake that I see people make. And they undervalue. And then only a year later, they realize like, holy shit, like now I have no way to improve my team. I lost a championship because I'm old everywhere and now I'm screwed. So that's one thing. And then 2 kind of pairs with that, but like, value flexibility. Like my mantra when it comes to drafting is I value flexibility above everything else. And what does that mean in practice? It means that early on in the startup draft, in rounds 1 to 4, I don't draft anyone that's old. I don't care like if they're the best tight end. I don't care if it's Travis Kelce. I don't care if it's like Dalvin Cook. Like I don't draft old players, because once you draft that old player, you have to go try and win now, right? You have no more flexibility. So you have to go all in on that year. And I hate that. So what I tend to do is I draft, maybe a young quarterback, young running backs like a Jonathan Taylor, right? I'll draft, wide receivers a lot as well, to keep my team young. So I try and stick to like almost under 25. Like you will rarely find me drafting someone above the age of 25 in the first 3 to 4 rounds, unless it's a tight end or a quarterback, just because they have longer lifespan, because I want to maintain the flexibility. I don't want to decide if I'm going all in or productive struggle or rebuilding within the first 3 rounds. I want to keep my options open. And I think most people trap themselves by either going all in or all out immediately, and then you're forced to like do these trades that you don't want to do. So those are the 2 pieces of advice. Just always value flexibility, and just shout out to the GOAT, Bruce Lee here, but he's, he always says like be water.
Yeah.
That's like basically my mantra when it comes to Dynasty. I'm always trying to be water and be flexible in the draft, because that's really how you extract the most value from people that did not value flexibility.
I love it, man. That's so insightful and so great to hear, because as someone who's like Travis Kelce towards the top 5 of my redraft board, it's like, well, dynasty wise, I mean, he's already making me a must-win now type of team. And that's keeping that flexibility, that shelf life of your team in mind the entire time is something I'm going to have to force myself to do for sure. And I love the idea too of just finding a good league. But I love and respect how often you'll call out the people that might not be good league mates in dynasty leagues, because like screw those people, if you're going to sign up, commit to it, because it does screw everybody else up if you draft a horrible team and you're just like, peace out. No, I'm not going to pay the buy-in. I'm not. Yeah. I've seen those call outs and I respect it. I like it. No one's safe when you got to have Mike looking around. So I love it. That's probably why we got some commenters and you're like Mike the GOAT, giving those firesides. You got, oh no, 2 wolf pack leaders on the same pod. Love it, man. Yeah. The crowd's loving it. So awesome stuff. Well, I do want to now dive into kind of your Patreon. I just subscribed early this week to kind of study your stuff, get a little bit of a mindset, and just been blown away since I did, just how much goodness is in there, especially the Discord. Like I've never really used Discord until recently this year, and your pack is always interacting, always chatting. It's fantastic. And I'm at that highest level where you get all 3, the Dynasty, the devvy, and the Cornerstone. Mm-hmm. And real quick for us, why don't you just define like, what are those? What do you mean? If there's like a beginner out there similar to me, what does that mean? What does that mean? The differences between those 3 things?
Yeah. First of all, appreciate the support. I'm pretty thankful just building the community. Like I didn't expect to get this many people this fast, but everyone's super active, and it's unlike Twitter where it's super toxic. People have interesting debates, disagree with each other, and somehow walk away friends. I know, it's amazing.
How can that happen, right?
Yeah, it's impossible.
No, good.
Yeah, but in terms of the rank, so the reason why I have it this way, so I have Dynasty. The Dynasty ranks is basically, it includes the incoming rookie class and the current NFL players. So that's everyone you can have in your league, right? So the devvy portion, for those of you guys, if you're just getting the Dynasty, you probably don't want to do this out the jump, but I bet you next year you're going to want to do this. And what it means is you can draft college players that are currently playing in college that'll sit on like a taxi squad on your team, and once they declare for the NFL, they roll into your NFL team. So the reason why that's really cool is because for someone like me that just always looking for like that next degenerate thing to do, now I can focus on college players, and like the reward from scouting someone and hitting on like, a second year or a freshman, right, that you drafted on your team when he was a freshman and now he's declaring as a junior. Like, imagine getting like a DK Metcalf or getting Jonathan Taylor, or for myself, I drafted
like signing day almost, right? Like
I drafted Cam Akers and Justin Fields. Those were my first ever devvy draft picks. And then now, I'm getting Justin Fields rolling into my roster. Last year I had Cam Akers rolling into my roster. So it's super cool because it allows you to kind of like do that research. And even if you don't play devvy, right? Even if you don't want to play devvy long term, it's really good because it forces you to know which classes are good, because then it tells you how to dominate or which rookie drafts picks to trade for before any of your league mates know. So that's the 3 different ranking sets I have. One is for Dynasty, which includes, NFL and rookie. One is for devvy, which includes like all the college players also as like a composite. So I have the devvy players ranked within the NFL players. And I think I haven't seen this done elsewhere, but the reason why I want to do this is because I wanted to offer users a way to think about how to trade in devvy. So if I want to trade like a college player, like what's that player worth, right? There aren't that many ranking sets out there that do that. And then Cornerstone is just a composite consisting of the current rookie class, the prior rookie class and the next rookie class. And the reason why it's called Cornerstone is because those are the pieces that you want to build your dynasty team around, because they're still young, right? They're productive, and their value is going to carry and hold and probably increase over the next couple of years. So those are like the pieces that you hang on to. And even if you're in a rebuild, you're like, man, I'm going to build around these 3 or 4 guys over the next 3 years. So that's how I kind of use those 3 different types of ranking sets. And then obviously each of them has like positional and whatever from there.
Love it, man. Well, speaking of those cornerstones, who do you kind of consider? Again, I don't want you're welcome to be like, no, I don't want to go that far behind the curtain, because we know we got to get the people over to that Patreon and see it all. But if you want to give us like a example of like, who do you consider, maybe one per position or just a handful of like guys that these are cornerstones. These are the guys that you know can be anchors. Even if you're in a rebuild, even if you're doing that productive struggle, you're not getting rid of this guy because he's going to be anchoring your team for years and years in the future. Who are a couple guys you consider that?
Yeah, so I mean, on the running back front, I mean, there's the obvious ones, like there's Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift, like very, very productive, very young running backs. The key is you're looking for early producers, right? And then the ones you typically want to build around, if you're rebuilding in Superflex especially, are quarterbacks or wide receivers. So you obviously have the Lamar Jefferson, right? Sorry, the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb. Like these are like guys that you want to build around, because in 2 to 3 years they might be the best wide receiver in the NFL. I mean, Justin Jefferson might be that next year. Who knows, right? Yeah. And then on the quarterback side, you know, obviously Justin Herbert is going to be a guy, the top ranked cornerstone quarterback for me right now, at least. And then I like ranking rookie quarterbacks pretty highly. I think most people shy away from it because they have a high bust rate and what have you. But I think, you know, I tend to value them more. I think they're probably safer than some veteran quarterbacks. Because I mean, aside from like Patrick Mahomes and like Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott, like which one of these guys really have that much shelf life and longevity? I think it's a mirage, right? Like, I mean, everyone's losing jobs elsewhere, so you might as well swing on the younger guy that has some rushing upside and also has a draft capital attached to his name. So that's kind of a little bit of insight into what I think about when I think of cornerbacks, is like the really young early producers.
Absolutely, yeah. And this class in particular seems pretty loaded of those types of guys. I mean, last year's class seemed more like a running back style class. 2020 just top to bottom had 5-6 guys that could be cornerstone running backs. To me, this might be the cornerstone quarterback class, because there's so many guys between Lance, between Fields, that have that mobility, that rush upside. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence, you know, the next Andrew Luck is what everybody's saying, with some mobility as well. Like this seems like the class to be going heavy on quarterback at Cornerstones for sure. So I love that one as well. Before we get, I want to ask you about some rankings, but I actually missed a question here where I asked you about the ideal league setting. So I want to just make sure to circle back to that as we talked about like what these types of things are. Yep. What do you consider the ideal league settings for Dynasty?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm like I said, I'm a bit of a degenerate, so I like really fun scoring settings that aren't like vanilla. So, you know, a lot of my leagues, first of all, you should try and play 12 teams or more. If you're down for it, 14 teams are actually really fun. Because it really forces you into understanding like depth and building deep rosters, which you should be doing for Dynasty as a whole, but it really forces you to do that. But I think if you're just starting out, probably the ideal is 12 teams, probably super flex, because one QB Dynasty is just not fun because the drafts are very vanilla. Super flex adds a lot of like strategy to it, so you should do super flex. And then I typically like to do PPR, and you know, ideally, you want to try and do some sort of points per first down, but that's not really mainstream yet. And the reason why is because that's like the actual value add in a real game. Like a PPR, if you catch a pass for like 1 yard, it really adds no value. Whereas like if you catch a pass for a first down, that's very different how you should be rewarded. And then I like to start with 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 quarterback, 1 super flex, 1 tight end, and 2 to 3 flexes. I try to target about 10 to 11 starting roster because I think the deeper it is, the more fun it is. And then no defense, no kickers. There's really no room for that in Dynasty. It just doesn't make any sense. If you want to play defense, go play IDP. And then a really popular format that's coming up now is tight end premium. So for example, you would have like all your wide receivers and running backs get 1 point per reception, and then tight ends get like 1.5 or 2 points per reception. And the reason why people think they do it is because it makes tight end more relevant, but in reality, it just makes Kelsey, Kittle, and Waller more relevant, and everyone else still sucks. So, but those are some of the most popular formats that I've done, and I like to do snake draft still, except I use like third round reversal, which means basically it goes like regular snake for first 2 rounds, and then the third round it like flips. That way the 1.01 isn't as overpowered as it normally is. But that's how I like to play. I know, I mean, everyone's up to your own preference, but if you're just starting out, I think those are pretty good settings to start with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I like to, I like the similar types of settings for redraft too, because I think a lot of those ideas reward the right owners. Having a super flex, so you have to have 2 quarterbacks. Suddenly that supply demand argument is way different. I like the idea of 2 flexes because you have to have deeper rosters to be able to fill those spots, and it rewards the right owners in that sense. So I like that for redraft. I can only imagine that's like everything we're almost talking about extrapolated to the point, like once Dynasty hits, because the mistakes and the rewards compound over time with that. I'm all about going deep like that. So I love it. And the first down, I don't know why that hasn't become commonplace like PPR, because I think that's a nice like balancer out for the guys like Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry, who might not catch a ton of balls, but are just workhorse churning and like real life wise are bringing so much value to their teams. I don't know why both redraft and dynasty wise, like that's not just a commonplace thing. I think it'll be one of those things in like 5 years where it's just like, why wasn't everybody playing points for first down?
It took the fantasy world forever to go from like standard to PPR. So I think changes just take forever. I mean, until ESPN and Yahoo and them make that change, like you're just not going to see much of it. But you're right. Like it's just a way better way to, I think, to actually measure the player's contribution. So you don't get guys like Naheem Hines, who really are not that relevant in NFL, becoming like actual relevant. Actually, I mean, he's still not relevant, but somewhat more relevant as a fantasy player. Whereas guys like Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry, like you said, 2 of the best running backs in the league, you know, they should get rewarded for what they're doing as well.
Absolutely. One last question on the setup. Do you like leagues that have like expiring contracts, or do you more so prefer like, 5 years or the price goes up or whatever, so eventually these people enter the redraft pool again? Or do you prefer like you have your startup, you lock in your teams, and then it's just about trading and rookies from that point on?
Yeah, I mean, I know people that do like contract leagues. I've like played in like a couple. They're not as fun for me. So it's kind of like, you got to depend on what you want to do. But personally, I just like the typical draft because I think I've found, at least in my experience, that's where trading is most active. It's very easy to conceptualize trading picks for players. When you try and add like dollars and stuff, like not everyone's like in, and they're more hesitant to like move and trade. So that's why I like the typical trading method, and it's easy for everyone else to understand. And, it's easy to do values. It's easy to discuss values as well. So I still like that type of format. I don't really play too many contracts or even auctions and stuff like that. I love the typical snake draft with third round reversal type of draft.
Love it. Awesome. Well, now diving back into those rankings again, our patreon.com/rpack, great stuff over there. Why don't you give us a handful of guys? Like, I know you said, again, it's less about player evaluation specifically and more about the game theory, learning your leagues, what they do. But at the end of the day, you know how our audiences are. They want to know, who does Mike love? Who's his guys? So who are a couple guys that, regardless of position, you're just like, I find them on all my dynasty rosters, or I target them in all my leagues. Who are you trying to go out there and get, particularly if there's anyone undervalued you see?
Yeah, I think I typically find Ryan Tannehill on basically all of my rosters. I think I've said it for the past 2 years. I think he's the most underrated quarterback from a fantasy perspective that we have. I mean, he's had consecutive like top 10, top 5 points per game finishes, and he's the same age as Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson goes multiple rounds ahead of him. They're both on, I mean, they try to be on more run heavy offenses. I'm not saying that you should take Ryan Tannehill ahead of Russell Wilson, but what I'm saying is at the cost that you can get him for, he's just a great quarterback one. He could be your quarterback one. I've won multiple leagues with Ryan Tannehill as my quarterback one. And also he could be your quarterback two. If you have Ryan Tannehill as your quarterback two, you are miles ahead of the competition because he brings the Konami code. People don't know it because he's white. I mean, I don't know why, but he used to play wide receiver. The dude has wheels and he can actually run. He's always run for touchdowns on the goal line. He's a threat there, and he's also good for rushing. So that's what you want in a quarterback, and he's still basically in his prime on a good team.
Now, I imagine, too, if you have Tannehill as your QB1, that probably means early on where everyone's going super flex like quarterback, you've probably stacked up, CMC, like maybe Jonathan Taylor in there, too.
Absolutely.
So you're probably stacked up, and getting a quarterback that really points per game isn't all that much different from the guys that have been going ahead of him. I like that strategy a lot.
That's exactly how I won one of my championships last year. I went pretty heavy. I went super heavy running back. I had like Saquon Barkley. I won this league, and I had Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, Miles Sanders. All three of them got hurt. I got Eckler too, who also got hurt, right? But the reason why I won is I had like James Robinson, I had Jonathan Taylor, I had a bunch of other running backs, and I had Ryan Tannehill as my quarterback, and he kind of stapled the way for me. So this is a great year to do it, and I'll tell you why. If you look at startup ADP right now, quarterbacks are flying off the board. Like in the first round, you're going to see 6, 7, 8 quarterbacks go off in the first round, and we don't see that much. And the reason why we're seeing it is because if you look at quarterback scoring last year, it was insane, right? If you didn't have a good quarterback, most of the time you weren't winning. If you didn't have like Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, etc. But I think, that was a big function of it being a really weird year, just a COVID year, shortened season, no training, no practices. In those types of environments, offenses tend to flourish. And then afterwards, defenses adjust, right? And you saw it towards the tail end of last year, like, quarterback production kind of tapered off a little bit. So I think people are currently overvaluing quarterbacks, and what that allows you to do is you're going to be able to get opportunities where you can get a team and start off with CMC and like Alvin Kamara. I've seen it, or Barkley and Alvin Kamara as your 2 opening picks. In years past, that would have been damn near impossible. You would have to sell your entire mortgage, your entire future to do that. You can do that this year and then run it back with a Ryan Tannehill in like the 3rd, 4th round, and then start pummeling back wide receivers. So I think this is a good year. I talk about flexibility, I talk about productive struggle, but this is a good year to balance it out and have some like win now teams, because you don't have to sell your future to do it. That's why I think it's kind of a good year and fun year to do that. So Ryan Tannehill is one of those guys for me, and then Kirk Cousins is another guy who people just hate. His value is never really reflective of what he's actually producing. So those are not popular takes, but those are guys that I've loved, and those are tried and true for me. And then in terms of maybe something more exciting on the younger side, like I really like Rashad Bateman. People hate Rashad Bateman after the landing spot. Like, oh my God, he landed in Baltimore, and Baltimore sucks. Lamar Jackson can't pass, blah, blah, blah. And you know what? Historically, I think that's definitely true, right? Baltimore in game neutral scripts are one of the lowest passing volumes ever. And it's for good reason, because they're also one of the most efficient running teams ever. Do I expect that to all of a sudden revert and they become the Chiefs? Absolutely not, right? But do I expect them to be the bottom of the barrel passing team, for the next 2-3 years? Because we're playing Dynasty here. Remember that. No. And even if I don't, like, you can be a very good producer even on a lower passing offense. We've seen that before with guys like AJ Brown and stuff like that. Tennessee also a very low passing volume offense, as long as there's good scoring opportunity, which there will be plenty of in Baltimore Ravens, and the depth chart is wide open, right? They've needed an alpha wide receiver, and Rashad Bateman can be that. I'm a big fan of him as a prospect. I have been. He was my wide receiver 2 before the draft, and he still is after the draft, because I think he's that good of a player. And that's one where I think it goes against the grain. Everyone's fading him because of the landing spot, and I'm happily just grabbing him up in every league that I can in the late first.
Love it. And that's actually one I've recently had a little bit of a turn on, because I was in similar in that pack, what you were saying, lowest passing offense, lowest completion accuracy, like all that, just horrible landing spot. And I think oftentimes us fantasy analysts are like looking for reasons to be down on people, because it's so easy to always be like, I love this guy, I love that guy. And that's what gets all the likes and the clicks. It's trickier to find the guys to not like. So we're always making these narratives. And the more I thought about it, I actually was having a conversation with Thor over from NBC Sports Edge the other day about the rookies. And we were talking how do we judge Lamar Jackson's accuracy and all this when he hasn't had that type of big body, like physical alpha receiver? Like how are we judging this guy that's still ascending and reaching his ceiling in Lamar Jackson when he hasn't had that talent? And I was looking at it like Greg Roman's offenses. Yeah, they are so run heavy, and it seems less than ideal. But man, Anquan Bolden had some great years in there, 1,007 plus TDs. We saw Michael Crabtree over in San Fran have 2 to 3 monster seasons, and Greg Roman's still very similarly run heavy offenses. But when they had that big body alpha that's working the middle of the field, which it sounds like Bateman truly can be, especially in your eyes, that those guys can produce in this offense for sure. So I've taken like a 180 on him where I was like, yeah, I'm probably going to fade this guy in my leagues to man, I can't judge this offense when they haven't had something like him.
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled to see what he does this year.
The Lamar Jackson hate has been just been mind-boggling for me because, like, why are we looking for reasons to dumpster a 24, 25-year-old guy who's not even close to his peak? He's still ascending. He's been playing, mostly with bums, right, on the wide receiver core. And, wide receivers matter. Like, they contribute. So we cannot really judge a guy. And I think, we learned this lesson with Josh Allen, right? Like, everyone thought he stunk. Like I did. I made that giant mistake. And I was like, yeah, he's gonna nerf Stefon Diggs. And then what you don't realize is, like, an elite wide receiver completely changes the game for a quarterback. And we just cannot make an assessment of Lamar Jackson as a player without giving him the weapons. And I think everything Baltimore has done in this offseason, I know everyone wants to look at history and be like, this is how they ran, but every step they've made has indicated to you that they want to improve their passing game. They tried to sign every big free agent they could. They failed, right? So what do? They traded one of the top offensive linemen they had to land another pick in a range to get the player they wanted. And they got this player, right? And then, you hear the GM come on and they say, look, we study the numbers, we study analytics, and Rashad Bateman was a good prospect. And then, they're trying to add other pieces around him, right? So, everything they've done tells me that they want to pass a bit more. They're not going to be a high passing offense, but even if they revert a little bit, that creates a lot of opportunity. And the depth chart is just wide open. And here's the other thing, like, Greg Roman won't be here forever, right? Like, right. He's either going to be really successful, right? And they're going to go deep and then someone's going to take him, or they're going to realize, like, hey, his offense hasn't worked. We've done it for three years and we've got bounced in the first, second round every single year, and he's going to be gone. So when it comes to wide receivers in Dynasty, you got to chase the talent, right? More so than any other position. Like running backs, quarterbacks, you want to account for the situation a little bit. That's totally fair. I do that definitely. But for a wide receiver, situation changes so quickly. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to whether or not you're better than the defensive back on the other side of the ball. That'll determine your targets. So, at the end of the day, you just want to get really good players, and then the situation and stuff will kind of take care of itself.
100%. Yeah, I can't wait to see if Bateman's as good as a lot of people, including you, think. But what his tape suggests, the analytics suggest, this offense could take to new heights. And I mean, this is an offense that everyone's like, oh man, they sucked. Like, they were still top 10 in scoring last year. Yeah, they weren't, historic number one like they were a year ago. But we've seen, again, Lamar Jackson, who we all knew was raw coming in, win MVP with, like you said, crap around him, lead the NFL in scoring with crap around him. So yeah, maybe there's a little bit of a down year, sure. But you add a weapon like Bateman, like, I would not be shocked to see him and that offense get back to cheat code style, levels with, maybe he runs a little bit less because he has Bateman. So now he's throwing more, but maybe he's in the red zone more often and just breaking off those 15-yard TD runs that literally were like clockwork. I mean, I think I tweeted out today, I had 9 30-point games, I think, in 2019.
Yeah, it was a wild season.
It was insane. And I wouldn't be shocked to see him. Before we move on, I got this question that put me in a blender. If you were drafting Superflex and you had both Josh Allen and Lamar staring you in the face, which one would you be going with?
They're very close for me. So in my Dynasty ranks, I think they're literally probably a couple of spots apart. But I have Lamar Jackson first, just because I think this is like the second coming of Michael Vick. Like, this is the most prolific runner at quarterback we've seen, and he's a better passer today than Mike Vick was at that point in his career. And we see Lamar Jackson is a pretty damn good character as well. So we're not worried so much about the character concerns. Like, imagine what Michael Vick could have been if he wasn't if he didn't run into all the bullshit that that he went through, or he put himself through, to be clear, early on in his career. And I think that's what we can see with Lamar Jackson. I think this type of runner is one of a kind. So to me, I have Lamar Jackson ahead of Josh Allen, whereas Josh Allen's last season was remarkable. Don't get me wrong. He made people like me look stupid who doubted him, because he was an incredible player, and the way the Buffalo Bills built around him was incredible. That's the underrated aspect. That's the aspect that I did not account for, is how well the Buffalo Bills built around his skill set by adding a Stefon Diggs, who was a premier deep threat, but also just one of the best route runners in the league. And doesn't need, you can throw, it gives you really, really big throwing windows, right? And they added Cole Beasley to kind of help him in the short and underneath. And then obviously Josh Allen can throw off platform. He's a fucking cannon, so he can throw anywhere he wants. So the way they built around him was incredible. But that type of season is very hard to replicate where you're throwing for like goddamn near like 5,000 yards and like you're throwing for like 40, 50 touchdowns. That is less replicable, I think, to me, than someone like Lamar Jackson going out and running for 800 to 1,000 yards every single season. So that's why I think Lamar Jackson.
It's a very fair point. It's one of those things where like it'd be very difficult to believe last season wasn't Josh Allen's ceiling. And it's not that he can't repeat that, but we've probably seen peak Josh Allen. There is a chance, no matter how good Lamar was 2 years ago, that we still haven't seen his final form. Like, I like that. I like that argument a lot. It was a tough question to answer, for sure. Well, we've talked about some guys you're higher on, a couple unsexy QBs, but that give you some nice flexibility in terms of loading up everywhere else, plus Rashad Bateman. Is there any guys like everybody's in on, it seems, but you're just like, nah, I'm not seeing it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a different spin on this question. It's not that I'm not seeing it, but one thing that I do in Dynasty, and this is how I've basically printed money for 3 years running, is whenever a wide receiver gets into the conversation for Dynasty wide receiver 1 overall, I'm looking to pivot, right? So, contrary to popular belief, like when everyone says sell, that it's not easy to sell that player because of the reason why everyone's trying to sell them, because they're not very good. So in Dynasty, for me, like I'm trying to pivot off of like good assets that I think have peaked in value for other assets that I think haven't peaked and have a strong ascension. So, guys like DK Metcalf, right? Who everyone has like, had consensus Dynasty wide receiver 1, probably 3 or 4 weeks in the season when he was lighting it on fire. Or even a Justin Jefferson, who's just incredible, rookie production, all-time producer. Or AJ Brown, who a lot of people have as their wide receiver 1. Those guys in my leagues, I'm very open to trading all of them. And what I'm looking for in return is another ascending wide receiver that I really like. Maybe a Jamar Chase, right? Maybe I'll give you some other names, maybe like a Brandon Ayuk, right? I'm looking to get one of them plus like future rookie first, because then what happens is if I'm right about that wide receiver, now I get another rookie first that is just guaranteed value increase on top. Or even if I miss on the wide receiver, I still have the rookie pick. So it's like I lost a little bit, but it's not the end of the world because there's other stuff coming. So I like to pivot off of really high-end wide receivers and trade down. Wide receiver trading down is the number one thing that everyone should be doing, but they don't, because everyone wants that Dynasty wide receiver 1. But when you think about it from a points per game perspective, they're not really winning you the league, right? It's really running backs and quarterbacks and tight ends. Wide receiver rank very, very low in terms of their wins above replacement. So it's not that I hate those players and I have them ranked highly, but just to give your viewers like a different frame of mind, those are the players that I typically try to trade off of. Even like Devontae Adams and Stefon Diggs, like I'm trying to trade out of those guys before they hit the value cliff, which is, usually when they hit around 20, 28 years old. And that doesn't mean they suck after, right? Like there's a value cliff and there is a production cliff. So the way I think about it is I try and get out of a player when they're about to hit the value cliff. And then when I'm contending, I buy back in after they hit the value cliff, but they haven't hit the production cliff. So between ages 29. So guys like Keenan Allen, I'm adding that guy on all my contending teams. Guys like Michael Thomas, I'm adding them on all my contending teams, because at that point, their production is going to exceed their value. So that's kind of how I think about wide receivers when it comes to Dynasty.
That's really interesting. And I noticed that when I was looking at your rankings again on patreon.com/rpack, if I'm not mistaken, you had like 15 to 18 like quarterbacks and running backs before you had your first receiver.
Yeah.
And the more you talk, though, it makes sense. Like you hear everyone, well, receivers last longer shelf life. You need those guys to be your cornerstone. But it seems like more and more, I mean, Justin Jefferson last year, like they just keep re-injecting these guys. They're becoming more and more freakish on the outside, where it used to be like, it takes 3 years for receivers to break out. Way long when I first started playing football. It seems like it's rookie year. If you're good enough, you're going to explode as a rookie the way the NFL is passing and going. So maybe you turn Jamar, obviously Jamar, we both did that. Justin Jefferson, you're, right at the top of rookie rankings right now, Dynasty rankings. You move him right now where it's peak. Again, you don't want to get rid of this guy, but maybe that gives you an outlet to Jamar Chase plus whatever else you yielded with that value. It makes sense, especially that wins above that replacement. The scarcity at running back and quarterback and super flex leagues. versus receiver position and the way they keep replenishing talent at that position. It does seem counterintuitive because receivers do seem to be like the dynasty cornerstones, but there's just a lot of them compared to the dynasty cornerstone running backs and quarterbacks and super flexes. So.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. You definitely want to build around wide receivers because you need them, right? But it's just like whenever, like wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 10, like Devontae Adams had a magical season, obviously, but like from him down, like you're not talking like really, really big differences, right? So you're not giving up point differential, and you never know like who's going to finish those wide receiver 1, right? Like last year, Devontae Adams, I had him as my bet finishing the wide receiver 1, but the year before, I didn't have Michael Thomas, right? So we're not very good at guessing who finishes number 1. So anytime you can kind of trade back into like similar type of talent and get rookie picks on top, I think that's a big W for any team out there.
Yeah, 100%. A bunch of people just commenting in saying, they're loving this. This is awesome. They're heading over to YouTube to continue watching and all this good stuff. So a lot of good praise coming in from Mike. A lot of interesting questions too. I know my man Steve was asking about age. Steve, we covered that right at the beginning of the pod. Mike was commenting on how he doesn't really look at anybody. What was it, like over 25, 26? You're like, that's my threshold. That's my cutoff.
Yeah. Early on in drafts, like it depends on the position. But like, I really look at people that are over 25 or 26 years old early on in the draft.
Absolutely, yeah. And everybody asking those questions, I will be more than happy. I'm going to stay on after Mike hangs up, but we have a loaded show sheet, so I will get to those questions. I know Mike's more of the dynasty guru here that you're probably hoping to hear from. If you want to hear his insight, patreon.com/rpack. He is always interacting with his guys over in there. So I do want to make sure we run through this show sheet, though, and respect Mike's time here. So in terms of rookie-only drafts this year, like what is your general approach? I know you've already mentioned Rashad Bateman is one of your targets. You're landing him a lot. Do you have a general outside, like other targets or other approach to this year? Or what are you looking at for 2021?
Yeah, I mean, it's it really depends, like, because like your rookie draft picks like kind of determines what your strategy is. But typically, I like to go for the value positions early, so quarterbacks and running backs, because I like to swing for wide receivers later, especially if you miss on Jamar Chase, because Jamar Chase is in a class of his own. So if you miss on him, then you're getting a big bucket of other guys, and everyone has that tier 2 to 3 valued very differently. So you'll see a lot of value tumble down to you. But one thing that I do, and I stick by this, is I try and avoid reaching for running backs later. So if I'm going to get a running back, I'll get a Najee Harris, I'll get a Travis Etienne, I'll get a Javonte Williams, and I'm fine reaching a little bit early on, in the top or midpoint of your first to get a couple of those guys, because what I don't want to do is spend a first round pick on a Michael Carter, spend a first round pick on a Trey Sermon, right? Spend a first round pick on these guys that Trey Sermon's a little bit better because at least he has day 2 draft capital. Michael Carter, I've seen go into the first round, and there's no world you should be taking a 4th round running back in the first round of your rookie drafts. I don't care how good you think that talent is, because you're just playing against the odds. You're stacking the deck against yourself, and it's not a viable strategy, because what you're doing is you're passing on wide receivers with pretty good profiles that have like 2nd round draft capital, 1st round draft capital in the case of Rashad Bateman. So typically, like I said, you focus on running back and wide receiver early, and then in the back part of the first, early part of the second, I'm just like smashing wide receivers. So I got a lot of Elijah Moore. I have a lot of Rondale Moore. I have a lot of Rashad Bateman. Like every time Rashad Bateman is in the late part of the first or like 2.01, I have a pick there. It's just an auto pick, because I think that's just his profile, his draft capital just makes a ton of sense. Like those are the guys in prior years, if you think about it, when people were drafting Keyshawn Vaughn, I was drafting T. Higgins. I love T. Higgins, right? And people were drafting, Devin Singletary, right? You could be getting guys like DK Metcalf and AJ Brown. You're getting much better profiles and bang for your buck at wide receiver there, in my opinion. If you know the analytics and if you know how to identify the better prospects and how to fade the really bad profiles, you're going to probably cash out more often on those than you will on like a Michael Carter or a Trey Sermon, because more likely than not, Michael Carter, I mean, I like the player before going in, but like, more likely than not, you're not going to get much of a return there within the next year or so.
Really interesting. Yeah. And that's, I think, another moment of like redraft versus dynasty. Like I like a lot about Trey Sermon and Michael Carter when it's like a 1 year, let's see what happens, because they both fall into these zone blocking schemes, the one cut backs that like fit it really well. And maybe they do blow up, but there is like a very big chance that given the draft capital, given like the low hit rates of that, if it's a redraft, like whatever, I go in round 6 or 7 and they don't hit, they don't hit, like whatever. It doesn't kill me. But if you pass up on a Bateman who becomes a DK Metcalf, who becomes an AJ Brown, and you went for the scarcity of running back, it seems like everybody wants to sprint and get that guy. It makes sense, like kind of, but when the hit rate's that low and we're seeing all these receivers hit over and over again, like that can really set you back for years, trying to chase for that next great blow up one. And then you look at like a guy like way back in the day, Alfred Morris did have maybe a blow up rookie year under Shanahan, but he was useless within 2 years. And so even if Trey Sermon blows up, even if Carter has a huge rookie year, it's not a great track record compared to what you might be passing up on with some of those wide receivers you mentioned, the higher draft capital, even if they take a little bit longer to blossom. I think that's one thing I'm going to have to shift my redraft kind of centric mind right now and be like, no, Trey Sermon, like as good as you might think he might be in year one, think about Kyle Shanahan, how many times you've seen a blow up that only lasted half a year at most. Like Interesting.
You try and like, I mean, the way you think about it is we're not very good at figuring out who's good, right? At least from an analyst perspective, but we are pretty good at showing you who's probably not going to be very good. So like the majority of my process is just built around finding out which guys are most likely to bust and then removing those guys kind of like from my board. So that's how I think about it, especially at wide receiver position. Like, we can't tell you like this guy's going to be a stud for sure. Jamar Chase might be the exception, but what we can tell you is like, man, like this guy probably not going to hit. Like Van Jefferson, one of the worst prospects I've ever seen, right? And I had 0 Van Jefferson. I didn't care if it was the 4th round. I did not draft Van Jefferson. But film guys are like, oh, we love him. He's a route god and blah, 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 blah. But like, when you bring in the numbers, it really kind of helps you narrow the scope and allows you to focus on the guys that can be really good. And that's how you get to guys like Rashad Bateman and Elijah Moore and the guys of that sort.
Love it. And you kind of already talked about this, like devvy included rankings. So we can probably move on. You talked about the importance of them being, you can see down the line what classes might be the most valuable, what players you should be like keeping on the back burner throughout your drafts and potentially even taxi squads if you're in like an actual devvy league. So I know we've already covered kind of like why it's important to have those rankings and you being one of the very few people, if maybe one of the only people that makes rankings that includes those, which is awesome. Is there any player though specifically or any reason other than like what you already covered, why they're important? And also anyone you're really eyeing long-term, like I can't wait for this class because this player is coming out. Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you why it's important. And this goes directly with my productive struggle strategy. Like I'm targeting and scooping up 2023 first, as many of them as possible, because 2022 class has a couple studs at wide receiver, a couple studs here and there, but it's more or less going to be very much similar to 2021, barring some like Joe Burrow type of immersion, right? And we have one of those every year, so it's not going to change the class. But 2023 is going to be very similar to 2020 and when you look at the running back class, because there's just a ton of talent there. And, contrary to PFF, who launched their college rankings, which I don't understand how they even got to this ranking. They're honestly, frankly, really, really bad. It means someone that didn't really watch college. But if you actually watch college, the names you want to look out for is like a Bijan Robinson. He plays for Texas. And this dude is an absolute beast. So I cannot wait. I already have him on one of my devvy squads. I drafted him last year before he even stepped on the field. But now that he stepped on the field, we're kind of getting a glimpse into what he is, and he is a workhorse. This guy's a 220 pound as a freshman who's catching passes, running all over the defense. You got Tank Bigsby right in that class. You got Jahmyr Gibbs. I always butcher his name. And then you got like Kendall Milton. You got Zach Evans. You got just a ton of talent at running back. And those are the classes that you want to gobble up a lot of the rookie picks. As we've already said, people value running backs, right? So once you gobble up those picks, you don't have to use all those picks. That's the thing. Like people always quote about rookies busting at 50% rate. That's fine and dandy. But like when I dominate a rookie class draft and I have like 5 to 6 rookie first, I probably end up using 1 or 2 of them. I use the rest and I'll trade out into veterans during peak rookie season to fill up my team. So that's kind of how I approach it. So those are really, really good, running backs I'm looking forward to. If you guys want to talk about, something more recent in 2022. Breece Hall, one of the top running backs coming out of there. And then it's some really, really good wide receivers. So they got Traylon Burks, who's like a massive, towering, like 220-pound alpha. You got Garrett Wilson, who's one of my favorite devvy wide receivers, plays for Ohio State, coming out next year as well. And then David Bell as well, who's one of the top wide receivers. He actually played on the same team as Rondale Moore, but he's more like alpha, like big size. So there's a lot of really, really exciting talent coming in for 2023 specifically, but also 2022. So that's why you got to play devvy, because if you don't play devvy, you don't know these names. You don't watch college, you don't know these names. So it's important to keep track of these guys so you know which rookie picks you want to get ahead of the curve on.
Absolutely. And to me, that sounds a lot like the 2020 running back class, the 2023 one you're alluding to, and kind of how you capitalized on that. I remember one of these squads you were showing me, it was like, didn't you have like 5 of like the first round rookie running backs or something crazy like that?
Mm-hmm.
Is like, you were like, I had Swift, Gibson, like Gibson was running back 5, Taylor, Hilaire, like it was insane.
Yeah, I just traded back and like went all in on that class and got the running backs. I had every single 2020 running back except for DeAndre Swift, because someone like sniped him for me. He's like, yeah, I don't want Mike to have all the running backs. So he did that. That's a league I play with some folks from the Ballers, so really nice people there. And then I did a lot of productive struggles in 2019 so that I could soak up all of the picks for 2020. And then in 1 year, I like flipped that team around. So that team went from like last place to like championship team, or last place to like second place, because I ran like really bad in the championship. But when you go all in on a class like that, that's how you do like the quick turnarounds, where you go from like bottom tier to like instant like top contender. So that's what I like to do. It's not, not everyone's strategy, but I'm perfectly fine punting a year or two so I can, to build these teams that I truly believe. I look at my teams, I'm like, I don't see how I can lose with this team, which means I will most definitely lose with them. But at the moment, I'm like, I don't know how I can lose with some of these teams that I have.
Absolutely. And a lot of what I have covered on the rest of these questions, we've already hit upon throughout like all this, because you've just been given such fantastic in-depth answers and all your mindsets. So it's been great. There's only a couple more I want to hit at. And this one, we're just kind of essentially talking about, but just to make sure we reiterate, because there are a lot of those people that play Dynasty or get stuck with a crap orphan or have a horrible first startup, and they're like, shit, I'm screwed. But you've already talked about how you've taken some like pretty bad teams, embraced the productive struggle, and now you've got these monsters that I still just look at. I'm like, oh my good Lord. Like, how does he have that team? So can you just kind of summarize one more time for everybody? What do you mean by productive struggle, and like, how does that play out?
Yeah, productive struggle or rebuild, it's just like one where you're kind of intentionally losing. And by intentionally losing, I don't mean like be sleazy and bench your studs. What I mean is like you're trading a lot of your top players away and getting draft picks in return. So by matter of those trades, your teams aren't scoring as much. So you're productively struggling because you're building towards the future. You're not just like losing for the sake of losing, right? That's where that term comes from. And what I do in a lot of those teams is I try and keep as many points off my team as possible. I basically completely disregard starting roster requirements. I'll pick up like guys off waivers to fill it if I need to, but I'm only focused on value. So I'm just trying to build as much value as I can, accumulate as much value as I can. And the easiest way to do that is to acquire future rookie picks. And then, when the rookie draft comes, I will pick some of those rookies that I really like, but a lot of the times I will trade out into veterans and future picks. And what that allows you to do is you don't want to be in the middle, right? Being in the middle in Dynasty is probably the worst place you can be. You hear it all the time. You either want to be number one or you want to be last place, because if you're last place, you get the best rookie picks, and that's how you turn your teams around. So the productive struggle is really pushing you to the bottom so that you can gather the picks and gather the value over time to then flip it around and immediately go from bottom to top versus like slowly trying to climb your way up, which is probably impossible.
Absolutely. Makes complete sense. And some of the teams, again, you've shown that have embraced that. If you haven't checked it out already, go to Bunk Bed Breakdowns. Mike has an awesome one titled like How I Got the Best Wide Receiver Dynasty Team of All Time. And it truly is like breathtaking, some of these teams. It goes to show. It's hard for me to picture that, like just tanking, I don't want to say tanking, but tanking in a way to get up there. It's like so hard for me pride wise, but then I see these teams. I'm like, all right, you're helping me like reframe how I think about fantasy a lot when I approach Dynasty. So the last couple here that I just want to quickly hit with you. You've mentioned a lot of what you do is trading, and that's how you've like really built these juggernauts, whether it's through acquiring rookie picks and then flipping them
Yeah.
or, capitalizing. But how do you approach trading? What are some like the best strategies you would say for dynasty trading?
Yeah. So I say this all the time, but like I really believe this. Like I feel like redraft leagues, they're won and lost in the draft. Like sure, you might get that miracle like waiver wire pickup, and we hear those stories all the time. But more or less, if you fuck up your draft in the first 2 to 3 rounds, it's over for you in redraft. Right? It's over. Like if CMC goes down, you're done. Like I had a redraft league. I drafted Barkley and George Kittle last year. They went down. It's over. It doesn't matter what I did. I wasn't going to win, right? So, but in dynasty, you can mess up and you players go down to injury, but you really win through trading. I am a volume trader. Like I am trading. I'm always the most active in my leagues. And in startups, like give you a sense, like one of my startup drafts, I think there were like 15 trades total. 12 of them were me, right? So, and it's like, people always do this and they'll go in the chat. They'll be like, hey, if you're interested in this pick, like send me an offer. Like, what you don't realize is everyone's lazy. Everyone's also like you. They don't want to go out and put in the effort. So what I'm doing is like when I'm on the clock, I'm not going in the chat and saying, hey, send me offers. I'll do that. But then I will literally go and send offers to 5 or 6 people. And you might miss on 80% of them. You probably will miss on 80% of them. But when you hit on one of them and someone says, hey, I'm interested, but that's a little bit too much for me, you can get into a conversation. Dynasty is about building long-term trade partners. You're not trying to fleece people. Because if you constantly fleece people, they will not trade with you anymore, right? So the key to dynasty is making trades that are fair at the moment, but you think are going to be a landslide down the line. So to give you an example of that, at the beginning of last year, was it beginning of last year, maybe the year before that, like, before DJ Moore truly like broke out, I was a big fan of DJ Moore, and Chris Carson was like a workhorse running back, right? So I gave like Chris Carson and Marlon Mack, who also at the time, was coming off a big season, for DJ Moore and like a second round rookie pick, right? And at the time, it's like, damn, you're crazy. Why are you doing that? Because like Chris Carson's a stud, Marlon Mack's a stud. And then a year later, it's like trying to get that trade back. People will laugh at you, right? So it's about making fair trades in the moment that you think will pay off down the line. And that's really how I think about trading, is like I'll construct trades that are fair on trade calculators, that are fair based on ADP, that are fair based on the now, because what I want is I want that ascending player. So usually I'm trying to give away players that are fair, but I think will be declining. So older players for younger players that are, equal value right now, but a year or two down the line, one's going up, one's going down. So obviously value will diverge. So that's kind of how I think about it. And again, you have to really understand your league mates' tendencies. Take the time that you would have spent watching film on, Najee Harris, and take that and try and engage with your league mates and try and understand what their thought processes are. What do they use? What trade calculators do they use? What pods do they listen to? Understanding your league mates and understanding what players are value is really going to be helpful. And don't just send trades to like people for players you want. Try and take a look at their team first and be like, hey, can I help this person? All right. Do they need wide receiver? Do they need running back? If you go to a team and you need wide receivers and they have are running backs, and they also need wide receivers, it probably doesn't make sense for you to trade. Right. So try and make trades that make sense for both parties, because truly the best trades are the ones where, like, if you're about to hit send and you're sweating a little bit, that's how you're about to put out a fair trade offer. And that's usually the litmus test for me. It's like if I'm sending an offer, I'm like, yeah, this is a smash. Chances are they probably also think it's a smash. You're gonna get denied. So don't try and like constantly try and fleece people. Start engaging those conversations, and don't be that guy that just lowballs people. I have people in my leagues that just like lowball all the time, and I'll tell you what happens and how I treat them is I just stop engaging. Like I'm like, hey, I have many other things where I can spend my time, where I don't need to waste my time with you. So you're gonna lose trade partners by doing that in Dynasty, and that's not what you want to do, because if you don't trade, you will not win.
100%. I think that's even, there's people in like my hometown leagues and everything, like redraft wise, that they sent me a trade offer so insulting like 10 years ago. I still won't ever even talk to them. So I can only imagine like in Dynasty where it's that much more crucial to be pulling off trades. You don't want to be that douchebag that's like trying to fleece everybody, at least on the complete surface. The way there's some of these that trade you just explained, you fleeced that guy, but it was because you had better foresight with it. And I love that idea of like looking at what looks fair in a calculator, but in your own mind, if you're smart enough and playing that longer game, or you got these guys you really believe in, it can really pan off. And that's why, again, a resource like getting direct access to Mike can be so helpful. Is a trade calculator is not going to tell you these things, but when you get a Discord or an ability to connect with somebody like that, it makes all the difference in these types of things. So that's why I'm so excited to be part of that.
On the flip side, just on the flip side of that, like, you know, if someone sends you an insulting offer, and I used to do this when I was first, when I first started and I was just a rookie, right? They send me an insulting offer. I'm like, dude, like, this is stupid. Why are you sending me this? Don't do that either, because sometimes they might not know. I mean, it could be a guy who thinks that's a fair offer for them, but they just don't know. But you don't want to burn that bridge by making them feel stupid. You just say, like, look, thanks, man. I think we're just very far apart on value. And I'll tell you, I have many trades that have evolved from stuff like that. And the old me would have been like, you're stupid, forget you. Like, but you know, as I've evolved a little bit more as a dynasty player, I just like, hey, like, I think we're off on value here. This is why I think that. And sometimes I'll be like, okay, whatever, like, I don't care. But other times you'll get someone like, oh, like, look, I didn't think about it that way. What about this? And then you'll find another trade avenue. Now, the ones that I ignore are the ones that constantly do it, and you know they're that guy. So I ignore those people. But you know, if you're just your first time playing with a bunch of new dynasty players, don't be like offended like by trades. Just, you know, just try and engage in conversation with them. And you know, sometimes it might just be low ballers for sure, right? But other times you'll find that you'll build like a nice trade bridge from someone because you chose to engage with them positively versus like calling them stupid.
You're speaking like directly to my soul right now, because that's exactly like how I would react. Like, screw you, don't want to talk to you again. But in Dynasty, you can't be like that, or else it's gonna, you know, unless you realize the person is truly a serial, just low baller. It's at least worth trying to repair or like see what's the mindset. Yeah, I got to try to embrace that, because I am pretty quick to just be like, screw you. Like, no, I'm done with you. So yeah, that's something I will definitely embrace. Well, the last one's here, just a quick one about who are some other accounts. Like I said, you're genuinely like one of, if not my favorite account to follow for Dynasty. Who are some others that either I might not know or our listeners might not know, and other resources you might use throughout Dynasty accounts?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you right now, like, I'm not a film guy, right? Even though it says Pro Scout on my Twitter, I'm just trolling people. But like when it comes to film, I don't understand that as well. So I try and reach out to other people and surround myself with people that do understand it, that are better than me. So Ray GQ, you know, I'm sure you guys know him. He's blown up. He's, you know, now part owner of FTN. So he might not even be able to remember us little guys soon. But you know, I was like a follower of Ray back when he had like a couple hundred people when he first started his podcast. And, you know, now we've become friends. I think he's one of the best in the devvy space. I learned a lot from him, just learning about college, the college game from him, and from the film side. And the thing with Ray is like he's also open to the numbers, and that's great when you get a film guy that's open to talk both ways, right? And then, you know, DF Bean Counter, Drew Ozenchuk, another, you know, good friend of mine. He's very analytically approached. We think about the game very similarly, although also very differently, which is super interesting. And, you know, he has a Patreon as well, Bulletproof. So he has a really cool process that he walks people through of how to identify prospects and how to fade the bus. And then Angelo Fantasy, at Angelo FF, I believe, he created his own site, and he breaks down film, you know, in a very concise and easy to digest manner with like examples and cut up. So I learned a lot of my film through watching Angelo. So those are three guys that I love. And then also Jetpack Galileo over at Fantasy Astronauts, at FF Astronauts. You know, he's a very film centric guy that also understands the numbers, but I really respect his process because he puts his grades out for the public, right? And that's a scary thing to do because, you know, I bet you most of these film grinders on Twitter, they all suck. If you put out their film grades, you tested it, it would be awful, right? But Jetpack Galileo was one of the first that I saw do that and also have proven success. So another guy that I go to. And then lastly, you know, not just for Dynasty, but more so for film, like real life film analysis, Jay Moyer, who also joined up with the FF Astronauts. He's one of the guys that I think breaks down running back film the best that I've ever seen on Twitter for the common man. You know, he has like the way he cuts his film. He shows you like the arrows. He shows you the gaps. He shows you like where the running back should go. So I learned a lot of my running back film watching from Jay. So at Jay Moyer FB, I think it is. But you look up Jay Moyer, he's on there. He's a big guy. He's
jotting it down right now.
Yeah. So those are a lot of my go-tos. And then maybe some smaller known guys, you know, at Cooper FF. He's a great analytics based guy that's coming up in the industry. And then also Matt Spencer on Twitter. I'm a big fan of him. You know, we're constantly in DMs where he's like that brainiac where he's like so freaking smart, and I try and like dumb his stuff down so that regular people like me can actually understand it. So we'll talk back and forth. We'll be like, hey, how does this look? I'm like, yo, look, like I can barely understand that. And like, I'm struggling to understand it. And like, I'm like pulling from my stats course. So I'm telling you right now that the average Twitter goer probably won't understand it. So you need to like, you know, dumb it down a little bit so that the common man can go. But he's one of the smartest guys for sure that I've seen. And then if you're looking for databases, you know, Peter Howdy, one of the OGs, you know, free database out there for wide receiver analytics if you want to get started in that. So many great resources, so many smart people out there that, you know, I draw from. You know, like I said, like I'm not a film grinder. I'm not even an analytics guy. I'm just a guy that's good at aggregating data and predicting trends. That's really all I am at the end of the day. If all these guys cease to exist, I would probably be not very good at all. So
awesome, man. Yeah. Awesome. Much appreciated. I think I follow almost all of them, but I definitely jotted down a handful to make sure I add to the repertoire. So much appreciated there. And the last one I want to pump there is, I know you've recently gotten involved with the Big Dog Gotta Eat brand. You're involved in their draft guide this year. So I just wanted to ask, you know, when, how, why did you get involved with these guys? What are you guys doing? And what's this draft guide entail here?
Yeah, I've been with them for a while now, actually. I left DLF like probably beginning of last year. And Nick, the founder of BDG, I've known him since like he started on YouTube with like, I don't know, 400 followers, something like that. And, you know, we've actually met live in person. We've done live drafts together. I've flown out to New York. We've partied together. So we're actually friends. Nice. And so when he was looking for someone to do like Dynasty content for him on the video side, like I joined up with them. So that's how I started. We started the Bunk Bed Breakdowns channel, and it's all falls under BDGE. And I helped write the draft guide last year as well. So this is my second year doing it now, bdge.store. But basically, you know, the draft guide, there's a couple different components. If you want to do redraft, Nick takes care of that. So he's been doing redraft forever. So I don't touch redraft at all. That's all him. But for the Dynasty portion, we have like 50 plus rookie profiles that goes through like their prospect profile, the numbers, the film, everything. And then like gives you our view of, you know, what their value is, where you can take them. And then I think the more exciting stuff is it's kind of like a live guide. So we're constantly updating the profiles. We're updating with articles that we're writing. So I'll be writing an article about like the top 5 wide receivers of 2022, right? For example. And then the other big thing is I usually write something, it's called the Bible. And that's like my strategy. So it's literally a blueprint that like outlays how I attack startup drafts. And I wrote that last year for them, and that got a lot of traction. People seem to like that. So I'm going to like update that a little bit based on the trends that I see this year. But more or less it'll follow the same like guiding principles with just some tailoring. So that's what the draft guide is. So, you know, we're always working on that and grinding away in the background to get that out to folks.
Awesome, man. Well, Mike, this was an absolute pleasure. As I said, I'm brand new to Dynasty, and like instantly in only an hour here, I feel like I am just like significantly, we're going to have our Roto Street draft, I think either next week or the week after. And like what was so helpful about this is you identified like a lot of the like emotional reactions or the thought processes that like your typical redrafter might have, and help me just be like, at least watch for these. So I like jotted down a bunch of things like this behavior, this, that, like make sure you're curbing that. And in addition to obviously all the player rankings, everything. And again, you can find all of Mike's stuff at patreon.com/rpack or the Big Dog's Gotta Eat draft guide, bdge.store. You can find all that there. And Mike, do you want to just remind our listeners where they can connect with you personally?
Yeah. You can find me at Mike Me Up with 2 P's on Twitter. All my video content is Bunk Bed Breakdowns on YouTube, all part of the BDGE family. And then lastly, like I said, just hop on the Patreon, patreon.com/rpack. We have about 260, 270 people now in there. And, you know, people are building tools, they're building ADP tools. And, you know, you can get any question you want answered, anything you want Dynasty. So, you know, when you're in your draft, man, you have questions. Now that you're in there, just ping me, ping people, post in the draft channel, post in the trade channel. You're going to get a million people come and tell you, you know, their views and then help you make that decision. So that's the best part about it, I think, is the community feel. So if you guys want to get involved, I mean, just hop on over there.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again so much for your time, for your insight, and best of luck in all your leagues this year, man.
Thanks, man. You too.
Cheers.